Welcome back, everyone. In this next chapter, what I'm going to be talking to you about is working with Dreamweaver's built-in FTP client. Now, this is something that's been around in Dreamweaver for quite some time, although in version CS6, Dreamweaver has done quite a bit to improve upon the performance of its FTP client. In order to get started, we need to simply understand that for anyone to be able to view your website online, you must first upload that website to a specific server. So, in other words, what you're going to need to actually work in this environment is some server hosting. So you'll get some hosting that you've paid for, or perhaps some free hosting online. And once you have information from that particular company that's handling your hosting, you'll be able to proceed with the steps that I'm going to do right now. So the first thing we'll need to do is to go to our site window, and we're going to manage a new site. Now, we've gone through this process quite a bit up to this point, but we've only ever defined information locally. In other words, where the folder that contains our website is going to be stored on our desktop. However, we're going to need to go one step further with our server information. So let's create a new site. This site we'll just call Chapter 12. And local site folder will point to your source files and the Chapter 12 folder here. You'll notice that inside of it there is one called Finished. So let's select that, the Finished folder. And it's here that we'll define where our local folder is located. Once we've got that done, we don't just click Save yet. What we need to do first is to define the server information. Now, when you're working with servers, what we need to understand is that we are going to be working with a remote server. And what that means is it's different from just a simple testing server. If you've ever been working with WordPress websites or PHP, then you're probably going to need to create a testing server. That's beyond the scope of this particular video tutorial, so if you're interested in doing that, I suggest that you look at some of the other Killer Sites titles that are directly related to WordPress or working with PHP. However, in our video tutorial, we're simply going to click on the plus sign to add a new server. Now here you can enter in a server name. There's no particular naming convention that you must use. You can leave spaces or special characters, it doesn't matter. The server name is really only for the purposes of Dreamweaver. So I'm just going to call this one Killer Sites. The next thing we need to do is to just leave the defaults here. We're going to be connecting using FTP. There are some other options, but FTP is going to be the one that you're going to be using 99% of the time, so I'll ask you to leave that. The port number here says 21. Don't change it. It's pretty much all we'll ever need. Now the FTP address. Now remember, the next three things on our list here are all going to be dependent upon your specific server host. In other words, who's hosting your website? Who are you either paying to host your website, or perhaps you're working with some sort of free hosting? Whatever the case may be, it's through these people that you need to get your FTP address, your username, and your password. Now, I have some hosting with a company called NetFirms, so I'm going to enter in their FTP address. And usually yours might look something like this as well. ftp.netfirms.com. Now the username is again specific to whatever your host has given you or whatever you've chosen, so I'm going to enter in mine for my particular website. Now the password is, of course, again anything that you've decided upon. I'll put in mine. You won't be able to see it, of course. However, do keep in mind that this is all going to be particular to whatever your specific host has given you. Now, this is really all we need to do at this point, although we're going to return back here and look at the root directory in just a second. Ultimately, though, you need not really change anything here in the web URL. That's pretty much exactly the same as what you've entered in the FTP address, except it's got the Hypertext Transfer Protocol prefix here. Now, all I need to do at this point before I save this is test to make sure my connection is working. Now, once you click on that and you see this message, Dreamweaver CS6 connected successfully, you are good to go. So we're going to click OK. Then you can save it again, and notice, even if it gives you this little warning that says it's inside the same folder as killer sites, that should be fine, not to worry. So I'm going to proceed anyway, click OK. Then I'm done, and now you can see everything that's inside of the finished file. Now, what you'll notice is that right now it's only showing me what's inside the finished folder on my particular computer, but I don't really see what's happening on the server. And that's because right up here I am still in what we call local view. We can switch to show me what's in remote view, or, as I'm going to do right now, I'm going to point you to this little icon here that says expand to show local and remote sites. So once I do that, this window opens up. Within this window, you'll see that on the left-hand side there is the remote server information, and on the right-hand side it says local files, and we can already see our local files and what's inside the folder. In order to connect to the remote server, what you need to do is to take this icon, connect to remote server, and make sure that those two plugs are connected. Once that happens, it might take a second or two, but then you'll eventually see what is residing on your server. So right now in my server I have a number of things that are available, and here there is a folder called public_HTML. In most cases, when you're working with server hosting, you're oftentimes going to find a folder called public HTML. It's within that folder that you'll see things like CGI bin, or in this case NF images, but you'll also be able to see a folder that is contained specifically for your particular website. In my case, I have santoromano.com here as my folder. If I open that up, you'll see that there's a lot of stuff that's going on in here, and that's because I've got a WordPress website on santoromano.com. However, one of the things I've also included is a little folder right here, and you can create folders just as you would on your local files. All you got to do is right click on this folder and then come in here and say create a new folder. I've already done that, and you'll see that I have killer app here, and that's got some of the files that we've been working with in previous chapters. Now at this point it's quite easy for me to take this information and to grab one of the files that I want to upload and quite literally just drag it right over here and upload it. If you let go, do be aware of the plus sign that was there. Now you'll notice that here it opens up my log, and although I have a pretty fast connection speed, within these files there was a 563K and a 349K file, and they both uploaded really quickly. One of the reasons is not simply because of my particular high-speed connection, but also because of the fact that the FTP client has been improved dramatically inside of Dreamweaver 6, and one of its improvements is its speed. So that's really all you need to do to upload your files. Now if I wanted to, as I will do, I'll right click on this file and I'm going to go to edit and delete the file. It should ask you if you really want to do so, and I'm just going to say yes. It's not something that's necessary to make this website work. Well, once you've got something on a server, now somebody can come to that website and view it simply because we've got this index page here. So in order to view this particular file, all I would have to do is to go to the website santoromano.com, put a slash after that particular address, and then say killer app. It will go to the killer app folder, and it will automatically open up the file called index.html. So I don't have to say slash killer app slash index.html. That will open up on its own. However, you might find that working with this particular mess of files here a little confusing, and perhaps we want to target just the killer app folder itself. Well, let's go back and see something. Here I have the killer app folder, which is inside the folder called santoromano.com, which is inside the folder called public_HTML. So let me show you how you can make some adjustments to your server information. If I go back to where it says Chapter 12 up here and say Manage Sites, I can double click the Chapter 12 folder. When I do that, it takes me back to the site setup. Here I'll go to the server information again, and I'll double click where it says Address. Now once I'm back in this area, I'm not going to change any of the information that's here. However, I'm going to change the root directory so we don't have such a big mess of files to work with. So I'm going to change this to the directory structure that we just looked at. It's inside public_HTML, and then I'll put a /, and inside public_HTML, if you remember, was a folder called santoromano.com, and inside that folder was a folder called Killer App. And it's the Killer App folder that I'm really interested in for this particular example, so that's why I'm defining the root directory structure. I'm going to test it, and if it tests and connects successfully, you've written everything the way you're supposed to. I'm going to hit save, save it again, then done. Now when I connect, notice I'm not going to have all of those public_HTML information. I'm not going to have santoromano.com information. It's pointing directly to the Killer App folder itself. And that's really great. So at this point, if I wanted to, I could create a new folder here, or I could just simply do this. Now when you are targeting a specific folder the way I am, it's really easy for you to just grab one of these folders and see these up and down arrows here. I can put a file onto the remote server or download or get a file from the remote server. So if I put up this file, it's going to take a second or two because those are pretty heavy files, if you remember. But once it's done, notice I didn't have to drag it specifically to any folder. It's right there and it's looking really good. So you can upload files just simply by selecting them and pressing the Put button, or you can download files simply by selecting them and pressing the Get file. And that's simply all you need to do. Once we have this information in place, all we now need to do is to target that information online. So let's preview this in a browser and see what it looks like. So here's the website, and if you add after the .com a /, and remember on the server there was a folder inside santoromano.com that had the name Killer App. So I'm going to write in Killer App, and then if you press return, you'll notice that the index page within that folder automatically shows up and it's automatically opened up. I don't need to write at the end of this index.html. If it's an index page, it will open up. So that's showing you how you can upload your files to and from a server. Now notice here it says download Killer App and it says lorem ipsum dolor sit amet. Well, I'm going to go back to Dreamweaver for a second and check this out. If we collapse our folder and then I'm going to open up the index page, I'm going to target in the design view. Let me turn off the visual aids. And I'm going to change the first sentence here to say, I just changed this. Now I'm going to save the file. And once that file is saved, I don't need it open anymore. I can then open up and expand local and remote. And I need not necessarily just drag this physically myself, although I could do that. If you have a lot of folders here and you're not working with a very specific root directory, that's what I would suggest you do. But in this case, all I need to do is to select the index page on my local site and put it up onto the remote server. Notice there was a little icon there that showed an up arrow. That up arrow indicated which file was changing, and that too is something that's new inside of Dreamweaver. Now if we return back to the browser, you can see that I have not refreshed it, so it still says lorem ipsum. But now if I click on the refresh button, you'll see it says I just changed this. So that's what you're going to need to do whenever you want to make changes to the work that you have online. And as soon as you have the information that you need and you've uploaded your website, and anyone in the world will be able to see that website as long as they know what your URL happens to be.